All right, I believe that we are live. Hello, heathens out there. Today we have a discussion on whether or not atheism is meaningless. And if you guys don't recognize my guest today, it's Lucas from Deflate. He runs the Deflate channel that I responded to a couple weeks ago, and he emailed me, connected with me, and wanted to have like an actual conversation about this topic. And because if I remember correctly, you said that you liked my video. I don't think that I was too overly harsh in it, so I'm
Yeah.
glad that it didn't come off as being one of those really just angry atheist types. So why don't you start by introducing yourself? Let people know what you're doing over there on your channel, and then we'll kind of get started in the conversation.
Cool. Thanks, John, for having me on. That's awesome. So yeah, I basically started off my channel. I think it's 2 weeks ago now, and I've uploaded 3 videos so far. And yeah, I just go through what I believe are the most popular and most often brought up objections people have against the Christian faith. So my first video I put up was the one that you responded to, John. It was on the question whether atheism implies the meaninglessness of our existence, and that's, yeah, again, what you responded to, and here we are. So again, thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, no problem. I always love it when people want to actually have conversations instead of doing the back and forth responses.
Yeah.
Which I know after watching my video, you said that you kind of had some new understanding or had some things that you wanted to clarify or something like that. Do you think that you can kind of go through your thought process, considering what my video, my responses, my thoughts on your video?
Yeah. Again, I think, as you said, I thought you were like very fair. Like, I enjoyed watching your response. And yeah, I mean, in general, I guess the key point I picked from it was that I'm not like, I wouldn't say that atheists can't have a subjective experience of meaning or of purpose. But I guess my point was that, well, on the assumption that God doesn't exist, it's very hard slash impossible to, to consistently say that, well, my experience of meaning actually plugs in with how reality really is. So there, I guess the key distinction is there is like between subjective meaning or objective meaning. And I think that, again, if God doesn't exist, all you have is subjective meaning, but it doesn't really correspond to how reality is. I mean, in other words, you could find meaningful to, I don't know, to advance the project of science, at the cost of making, I don't know, experiments with human beings, let's say. Or you could find it meaningful to be a Mother Teresa and help others. And, there is no objectivity to either of these two meanings that you could conjure up as an atheist. So that's, again, I would never say that atheists are, completely, in despair all the time. But I would say that your experience of meaning cannot be consistently explained against the background of atheism. That's my claim, and I felt that was probably the thing that you or where we might have had a misunderstanding, probably. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I don't understand like the connection between meaning and reality, like as far
Yeah.
as like the two connecting, because like everybody having giving their self meaning in their life is kind of like them having a set goal for their life, and it's a subjective goal. And what I think that you're really talking about is absolute meaning, not necessarily objective meaning, because you can be objective like about the meaning to your life, or or
Mm.
morality or anything else, as long as you have like an end goal that you're trying to get to. And so if you have like an end goal in mind, then you can be objective, about certain things. But the objective part is not necessarily absolute. So would you say that that's really more what you're talking about here, is absolute meaning rather than objective?
Yeah, but I guess the two are actually interlinked. So let's say, I think when you did your response, I think your wife, made the comment that, well, we help the poor, and we do humanitarian stuff, and that's great. And if you have that goal to, let's say, help other people, then obviously, donate money or like packing food packages for the poor, well, that will be meaningful. But what I'm talking about is, and that's where kind of the objectivity or ultimate meaning thing comes in, is, well, what tells you that actually helping the poor is meaningful? That's what, that's the thing. It's, of course, relative to your goal that you set for yourself, a certain course of action will be meaningful. But the question is, well, is that goal ultimately meaningful? If, again, God doesn't exist. That's the question. What does define or ultimately set up like meaning in the universe, to which you can then kind of navigate your own, like the meaning that you give yourself, or that you had for,
Right. Well, because in my view, we give ourselves meaning, even Christians do. And so this ultimate meaning that you're talking about that exists outside of us, I really don't understand why the universe has to like have meaning to it, or that like anybody's personal like subjective end goal has to have some kind of overarching ultimate meaning like to reality. I guess I don't understand that, because like I'm envisioning like a deserted island in the middle of the ocean, and there's nobody on it whatsoever. There's just trees and maybe some animals on it. Like, is there ultimate meaning there? Like, what would be the ultimate meaning devoid of human life?
Well, I guess the thing is whether, I mean, I'm not saying like the universe does have to have me. It could be, it could be that the universe is meaningless, and I do think that, if there is nothing from outside the universe that, let's say, endows the universe with meaning, then you're left with, I mean, I think Sartre said, just with the bare, valueless facts of existence. You just have a universe, but, well, that, it's just an existing universe. There is no, like, the universe cannot give itself meaning. And then the thing really is that if you have a meaningless universe, you can say, well, I create meaning, but again, that is then completely subjective. And that, maybe let's define the terms. Like, subjective means that it's like something is subjective if it's dependent on human opinion. To say, well, vanilla ice cream tastes better than, I don't know, a carrot. Well, that's subjective. There's nothing objective to that, because it's different for you, as it is, and someone else likes strawberry or whatever better. But to say that atoms are physical particles, that's objective. There's, whether you like it or not, whether that's your preference or not, it just doesn't matter. It's objective. And so that's what I'm talking about. If you're saying, well, the universe doesn't have to have meaning, yeah, sure, it doesn't have to, but given that, or on the assumption that the universe is meaningless, you can't come and say, well, I create my own meaning within it. I mean, that is then just, again, a subjective projection into something that is not there. It's like saying, well, I walk down the streets, I see a rock, and I call it Anthony. Well, just because you call it Anthony doesn't mean that this rock is called Anthony. It's to you. That's what it is. But it's not objectively true.
Okay. Well, isn't that inherently true about any particular specific religion? Like, I'm assuming that you're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't it entirely subjective that you think that the Christian God is the one that gives this universe meaning?
Yeah. So yeah. The thing is that, of course, I'm not saying that what I'm talking about here is like proves the Christian God, and I think I actually say that at the end of my video, that like that doesn't prove God's existence. So I'm saying, or to respond to your question, yes, I mean, I have a subjective experience of meaning too. I have, like, as I go through life, and let's say I hopefully love my neighbor as myself. Well, that gives me a subjective experience of meaning. However, on my worldview, or against the background of what I see the universe to be, it plugs in, that subjective experience of mine plugs into how things really are. That is, well, the universe has meaning, and one of the kind of meanings that God has given it is, for people to be loving towards one another. So when I have an experience of love, well, which is meaningful, well, that corresponds, so to speak, to how reality is really set up. You know what I mean? Whereas I believe that if the universe is meaningless, or again, on the assumption of atheism, if you just have, again, the bare valueless fact of existence, if you have a subjective experience of meaning, that does not correspond to how the universe actually is. It's just your subjective experience. Does this make any sense?
Well, I feel like what you're saying is that in order for us to have a true meaning in life, the universe itself also has to have a meaning. Is that right?
Sure. Or to put it the other way around, if the universe is meaningless, like universe meaning everything that exists, if everything that exists is ultimately meaningless, it's inconsistent to say, well, I can create meaning. Like, how are you going to create within a system that is devoid of meaning? How are you going to put up meaning? How are you going to infuse meaning other than that meaning turning out to be completely subjective again?
I guess I've got a lot of questions racing through my mind, so sometimes it's hard to keep up. But why is it bad, I guess, or why is it a bad thing if the universe is meaningless, but we have our purely subjective meanings that we give our lives? Because like I'm thinking about it, and I just don't see the issue with us having a subjective meaning to our life. And I mean, for me, at least, it seems like you need a mind or somebody to consciously ponder their existence and the meaning in their life in order to give their life a meaning, whether that subjective meaning is, to praise the Christian God or to praise the Islamic God, or to, not praise God at all, and just to have some other kind of meaning to their life that doesn't involve God. I guess I don't understand why having a subjective meaning to your life is a necessarily bad thing.
I mean, again, like having a subjective, I would call it subjective experience of meaning. I'm not saying it's bad or good or bad. I'm just saying, well, the question is, does your subjective experience of meaning, again, correspond or can it consistently be explained against the background of what you believe about reality? So again, I would fully affirm that you, John, as an atheist, can have a subjective experience of meaning. But what the question I'm raising is, against the background of what you believe, does your experience, is it, again, does it correspond to your worldview? Does it correspond to what you believe about the universe?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess where I'm maybe I'm just not understanding it is why does it have to correspond? Like, what out there says that like the two have to correspond with each other? Because, like, just for instance, I'm thinking about it, take a picture, right? Let's say you've got just a matte picture that is just all red, right? Mm-hmm. Does that mean that every single pixel in that picture is the color red, or could it possibly have different colors scattered throughout it?
Yeah, it could. So what do you want to say with that illustration?
Well, but my point is that I feel like you're going for kind of a generalization, sort of. Maybe it's not a generalization fallacy, but basically you're taking the whole being meaningless and saying that whole, everything contained within that has to have this particular attribute. So, like, if the reality on the whole is meaningless, then that means that everything contained within it is also meaningless. And I'm trying to use the analogy of a picture that's all red. And just because the entire picture is red does not mean that each individual pixel within the picture is red. And so it kind of seems like you're kind of making an overgeneralization kind of thing, to me at least, because I don't see anything that would indicate that the universe being meaningless means that also any meaning that we could derive for ourselves, or that we can't derive like any kind of true meaning for ourselves or anything like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got that across
No,
appropriately.
yeah, no, I get what you mean. You know, so let me again let me pick the example I mentioned at the beginning. Again, if the universe is meaningless, as you say, if reality is meaningless, and you still want to create meaning for yourself, let's go with it. Again, how are you gonna evaluate whether the meaning that you're going for is actually the real deal, so to speak, as opposed to, I don't know, Peter or I don't know, Anthony's meaning that they go for are the real deal. Maybe that kind of gets the thing I'm trying to say, get like, maybe that gets it across better, is again, like, take the Nazi scientist trying to do experiments at human beings in order to advance science, as opposed to Mother Teresa. How, if the universe is meaningless and these two people come up and say, well, the universe is meaningless, but I create this meaning for myself, again, to advance science at the cost of human beings, I don't mind. And Mother Teresa says, well, the universe is meaningless, but I try to help the poor. Who is to say that the Nazi scientist is actually in tune with what is real or what is supposed to be, as opposed to Mother Teresa being in tune with what is supposed to be? Again, that's where, both of these people make subjective claims, and it is impossible to make an objective judgment about who is actually, right, or who got the meaning right, because both live in a meaningless universe, both come up with a subjectively put together meaning, and there you are. There is no measuring stick against which you could say, well, this person is actually in tune with the meaning of the universe, whereas that person is not. You know what I mean? So that's the
Yeah,
problem you set yourself up for if you say the universe is meaningless, but I can have a subjective meaning.
I see. I don't see it as a problem though, because all throughout time and space, you have these subjective yardsticks with which you measure things by. Even in Christianity, you have a lot of different yardsticks. They all point to the same end goal, the same ultimate meaning. Which let's clear this up. What would you consider the ultimate meaning of life in the universe to be, other than
Yeah.
42?
Other than what?
42.
I, I like to sum it up. I would say, what Jesus said, like, love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. I think that sums it up.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of curious. I mean, like the conquistadors that conquered, the
Yeah.
Americas. I mean, they had the exact same end goal, and they had a subjective yardstick with which they were to measure, their actions by.
Mm.
And they were ultimately, working towards that goal. But
Yeah.
the same thing could be said for other Christians that attacked, or went for that end goal in the same way. So it seems to me like even on Christianity, with a set end goal of loving God and loving your neighbor, it seems like even in Christianity, there's a subjective way to reach that ultimate meaning. But I also don't see a need for an overarching ultimate meaning that transcends like everything else to establish it as the answer to the meaning of the universe. I just simply don't accept that there has to be like an ultimate meaning to the universe and life and everything.
Yeah, but then again, how are you gonna, you know, say that, well, a person who kills others is, out of, I don't know how you would want to put it, like, is wrong, or is out of tune or out of touch with what the universe is meant to be, as opposed to saying, well, the person who actually cares for their neighbor is, in touch with how the universe is meant to be. You you know, you drain you make impossible you make it impossible to make that judgment. If you say that if there is no meaning, like you have no consistent way to make a judgment between two opposing options, you know.
Well, no, I mean, I think that we all have our own subjective way of determining, right, wrong actions, as well as, whether or not a certain action is used to attain a certain goal. I disagree with the idea that the universe. This still goes back to me disagreeing with the idea that the universe needs an ultimate meaning in order for us to be able to discern whether or not our meaning is useful. Like, we're a social species. And so, in order to live in a society, we have to have shared goals of, surviving and living. And so we develop these shared goals, but these shared goals, they don't transcend cultures. There are some things that are seen as transcendent among different cultures, but for the most part, the different cultures have different ideas as to what is appropriate or inappropriate for them, right? And so because we have these differing ideas about things, we all have these different subjective yardsticks, if you will, with which to measure things by. And I can say that it's wrong to like go out and murder people because I have my own yardstick with which to measure, moral actions or moral decisions. And I don't think that I need to know what the ultimate meaning to the universe is, because I don't think that there is ultimate meaning to the universe, that everything just exists, as it is. So with that in mind, I myself can still measure those actions. So I'm kind of curious.
But
go ahead.
You can measure those actions, but again, would you be able to tell someone who goes around again killing people that they are wrong? Would you be able to say that this is wrong?
Yeah,
I mean,
I can.
But I mean, would you be able to say that this is objectively wrong?
I can be objective about my subjective moral standards. And so, I mean, I can be objective about it. I still think that you're slightly convoluting objectiveness with absolute things, right? So is he absolutely wrong? I wouldn't be able to give you an answer on that, because I don't know. But I don't think that there's an absolute, like, I think that there's an absolute truth to reality, but with that, what I mean is that there's an absolute truth as to what happens in reality, not that there's some kind of absolute truth as in like, well, this is how reality should be. Like this right here is the end goal of civilization and reality in general. Like I don't think that particular thing exists.
Yeah. So you don't believe again that there exists an absolute, as you said, an absolute goal towards which we should work for, right?
Not that, not anything that's transcendent of any individual person. I think for the most part, the best that you could probably get to is just survival. I think survival is a very basic transcendent goal of all organisms, because that's basically what all organisms try to do, is just survive so that they can propagate the species.
Yeah, but then again, other than making, like, subjectively telling the murderer, like, well, I as John having goal XYZ or goals XYZ, I don't like what you're doing. Would you be able to tell them, well, you're actually wrong? Would you be able to? Well, but by what? If you don't have that, again, absolute goal towards which everything should work, like how are you going to make that judgment other than being subjectively just your own opinion? Like, you don't like vanilla ice cream but prefer chocolate ice cream. Well, this other person happens to prefer vanilla ice cream over chocolate. And so, since again there is no ultimate way things are supposed to be, how, like, who are you to tell that their preference is wrong?
Well, because like I've said before, we all have our own subjective like moral foundations, and because we live in a society and how societal organisms work, we do have similar shared goals of that society. So
So okay. So,
no,
but
go
who?
ahead.
So who would like? I mean, in Nazi Germany, there was
Mhm.
like a different set of goals, obviously. So who was, how would you approach the Third Reich
I mean,
and challenge them?
considering the actions of the Third Reich and their effect on the world around them, I would say that we would judge them as doing something, wrong, and it's due to our understanding of society. I mean, you have within the Bible itself, you have God commanding the Israelites to do that exact thing,
Mm,
when he goes and he tells Moses to kill all of the Midianites,
mm,
you have the Israelites thinking that the Midianites are doing things wrong, and so they're going to go in and stop them, and that's
mm.
completely subjective. I mean, I get in the Bible that it's coming from God, and God is supposedly the one that created everything, and is laying down what is good and what is bad. But my point is that even in the Bible, there's a subjective sort of yardstick that they measure, and they say, well, that is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is good, and this is good. And the similar ways we do it here as well. Like with your Nazi example here, we would measure them to be morally abhorrent, just like
Yeah.
almost pretty much everybody else, to the except of whoever else was in the Axis thing group. Everybody else was like, "Yo, this is bad," and it's all because we live in a society. One of the values that we have is other human lives, and so given those ideas, those values that we have inherent to all of the societies that were against the Nazis,
Mm,
um, you know, we banded together and we were like, well, no, this is wrong. And we were able to do that because we had this end goal of the value of human life, right?
yeah.
We all agreed upon that. And so we were able to judge them. But I mean, there's been several times throughout history where, we have been like, well, no, this is wrong. And other people have been like, I'm not really all that bothered by it, kind of thing. So, I mean, it's all inherently subjective.
Yeah, but wouldn't that lead to a kind of might makes right mentality? Because
No.
aren't you basically saying that if we all agreed, or if the Germans succeeded in convincing everyone that their race should prevail at the cost of whoever, if that was the agreement to be found, would that have made it right by virtue? Because if it's all about people agreeing, then the thing you might set yourself up for is that, again, well, if the powerful uh, succeed in bringing about an agreement that actually doesn't serve human life but only a certain class, race, or whatever, then, well, by virtue of the agreement, it's good to go.
Well, now,
And
I
again,
mean,
you
all
don't have
societies. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, all successful societies, they have flourished because these shared end goals develop. And true, with our own modern perspective and how we understand things, we can condemn society's actions in the past, like the Nazis. We can condemn them. Within the Nazi society in general, you did have people that thought that it was wrong, but that's where the individual subjective moral yardstick comes in, and they themselves can be like, well, no, I think this is wrong, and it's
Yeah.
not because there's an ultimate meaning to the universe, or there's some kind of ultimate right or wrong answer when it comes to moral decisions. You have people within the Nazi regime that thought that what they were doing is wrong. But then you
Yeah.
also had other people that thought that it was right. Just like in
Yeah.
America, when it came to racism and the segregation of the races in America,
Mm.
you had people that thought that it was morally justified by God's word to
Yeah.
segregate and to subject African Americans to slavery. And then you also
Yeah.
had people that thought that it was morally abhorrent for the exact same reason of God. So
Yeah.
you have, like, even within Christianity, you have these separate subjective moral yardsticks that we all keeping with the Christianity. Everybody in Christianity has their own idea about what God wants. And so there's no transcendent universal answer for what God wants, because
Yeah.
everybody has a different idea. And it exists that way because it's inherently subjective, these moral
Yeah.
yardsticks or this meaning that we have for life.
But John, would you say that given that, let's say, quantum physicists have different hypotheses about how the quantum world functions, that there is no objective reality about the quantum world? Because it seems to me that you're implying that, again, by virtue of there being disagreement between subjects, between people, there is no objective reality about the subject matter. And I think that's fallacious. You can't, scientists in any field, they come up with opposing hypotheses. Like, even, there are different ways people look at evolution, different ways, again, people look at any, well, geology, paleontology, quantum physics, biology, pick any field. And in fact, science progresses by people disagreeing with each other. So it seems to me that you're implying that, well, because people disagree on something, that there is no objective reality out there.
Well,
I could, but I think that's wrong. If I don't know, if we asked 5 people, well, how many people watched the live stream between John and Lucas, and one person says, well, I think there were about 2,000. Other people say, well, 300. Well, just the fact that there is disagreement between people doesn't mean that you can't pin down an object, that there isn't an objective reality. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like I said before, I think that there's an absolute truth to the events that happen in reality. I think there's an absolute truth to how our reality functions.
Yeah.
But considering that how we treat each other in this reality, it's entirely subjective because we are the ones that are determining what is right and what is wrong. There's no transcendent objective, or not objective, but absolute standard that exists, that at least that we can perceive, as to how we should act. But I feel that that's that way because of how our minds work, how we rationalize our reality. We are the ones that determine what is right and what is wrong.
Mm.
Even with the Bible, because the Bible
Yeah.
was written by man. All religious books are written by man, are dictated
Yeah.
by what men think. And
Mm.
so I think that it's the reason why there's no absolute moral decision or moral right or wrong is because it's inherently a subjective thing that we as a species determine. And so
With-
that's why, devoid of all human life, morality simply wouldn't exist. Like,
mm.
out in space, in the asteroid belt, in
Mm.
our own solar system, there is no morality inside that asteroid belt. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you don't have moral beings, it doesn't make sense to talk about morality. Just as if you don't have atoms, it doesn't make sense to talk about, I don't know, atomic particles, right?
Right. So we are the ones that create morality by us just being in existence. Right?
But
So
okay,
does that
but
make
could you
sense?
also, yeah, but could you also imagine that there is, I mean, again, you disagree, but could it be that there is actually an absolute standard, not just about about the way things are, but the way they're supposed to be. Again, an objective, an ultimate standard about meaning. But we happen to disagree on what it is, just as there is an objective reality about everything in the physical world, and yet scientists and everyone else for that matter happens to disagree about what the best way is to describe those realities. Could it be that there is an objective thing out there, but we as subjects, we just keep disagreeing with each other?
Well, so I'm kind of curious. How would you know that you've attained or you've gained knowledge of this absolute like standard? Like,
Yeah.
how would you absolutely know that was the standard? See, I think I have like I think that there's an objective truth, or not objective, but absolute truth to the universe of what happens in this universe and how this universe operates. But it becomes the question of how do we know that we've gained this absolute truth? Like how I think that it due to our restrictive experiences in this universe, how we experience the universe, I don't think that we would ever know that we've attained that. So I'm kind of curious as to why or how would you know that you've actually identified this, how the universe is supposed to be?
Yeah. Very good question. If you talk about like absolute knowledge, absolute certain knowledge, I mean, that's unattainable for no one. No one can get to absolute certainty. But I would say that, well, you take into consideration your experience of life. You take into consideration, well, just the facts about reality. And then what you do is, well, you try to you test different hypotheses, so to speak, or worldviews, and the one or the view which has most explanatory power, coherence, most explanatory scope seems to be, or would then be, the one that again plugs in or corresponds best with reality. I mean, that's how, again, a lot of scientific fields work. You different hypotheses are proposed, and absolute certainty cannot be attained, let's say, again, in geology and that sort of stuff, because you're talking about events that cannot be accessed or repeated. But the way the discipline proceeds is, well, different hypotheses are put forward, and the one that again has most explanatory scope, that explains most of the details and does so with the most coherence, is taken to be the best account of the subject matter. And so I think that applies to, again, worldviews, religions, or whatnot. Is the system that explains experience best would be taken as the one that actually corresponds to reality most.
So let me ask this: prior to the late 19th century, it was seen as just how the world was supposed to be to enslave African Americans.
Yeah.
And then, after 1865, and I mean, honestly, even now we still have trouble with it, but at some point it became abhorrent to own slaves. And, I'm just kind of curious, how do you rationalize that with this idea of how the world is supposed to be? Because prior to 1865, and even after that, it was seen as God's will to subject people to slavery. Even in the Bible, you have that.
Yep.
So at what point did it become known that that's not how the world is supposed to be?
Yeah. Well. So are you asking me at what point it became to be known, or how you make it? How you, like, given that state of affairs, how I could possibly claim that there's an objective way things are supposed to be?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering how you rationalize that radical shift in the understanding of how things are supposed to be, because it wasn't that God had a new commandment or a new prophecy or anything like that revealed to us that slavery was bad. It was a social movement that the people, with their own subjective yardsticks, decided this is no longer acceptable, And so then God's word seemed to change, like
Yep.
in the grand scheme of things, overnight. Um, it seemed to change overnight to, well, now this is abhorrent and bad. So I'm
Yeah.
just wondering how you
Yep.
rationalize that.
Again, I would rationalize it by saying that, again, we as subjects, or as well as human beings, we, we make progress in our knowledge. We move forward in how we understand things, again, in any knowledge discipline. But that in and of itself has nothing to say about how objective reality is. Let me give you another example. I mean, prior to Newton, no one knew about gravity. No one knew that you can describe the falling of an apple from a tree by the law of gravity. But that doesn't mean that gravity wasn't like an objective truth uh, that described how apples fall from trees. Okay? It simply means that people didn't have access to that knowledge yet. And so, in the same way, just because, you know, 200 years ago or 300 years ago, it was okay, I mean, apparently okay, to have slaves, and now it isn't. That in and of itself is not an argument against there being an objective way about how things are supposed to be. It is simply a truism stating that, you know, human beings evolve in their knowledge, you
Well,
know?
but I really don't I don't see it as far as in the perspective of Christianity having the ultimate
Yeah.
explanation, or
Yeah.
really any one religion having the ultimate explanation,
Yeah.
because in that particular scenario, God mandated that slaves be kept, and He even mandated laws surrounding how slaves are treated. It would
Mm.
seem to me that if slavery was not how things are supposed to be, God would have said that. You know, like this ultimate meaning that we seem to have understood for thousands of years up until that point was that, this is the way things are supposed to be, that, slaves are to be kept, that it was a perfectly fine thing to have, and it was perfectly moral to have them and treat them well within the confines of the laws laid out in Leviticus.
Mm.
So, I mean, I would think that if it was just like the progress of our understanding of how everything's supposed to be,
Mm.
it would seem that God has changed His mind at some point, but He didn't actually let us know that He changed His mind. Because we have specific quotes from God saying enslave these people, and for some reason now it's not taken that way. Like I guess I guess I'm very confused in this radical shift in understanding without an explicit command from God.
Without an explicit command from God that like slavery is wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know like how much sense it makes to talk about that like example specifically, but I mean the Bible starts off with kind of claiming that every person is made in the image of God. So you have, like universal dignity and value given to everyone. And then, well, again, within a certain period of time, you have the Israelites. Like there is stipulations about, well, slaves or servants, how they're supposed to be treated, and there was no, I mean, explicit prohibition against it. But again, I mean, basically, the ultimate standard um, given from the beginning is, again, every human being is equally valuable. And then so that's what you start off with. So that is an absolute standard. And then even if, yeah, well, again, it's a complex topic, like Old Testament laws and commandments. You have like laws given for a specific for a specific time to a specific people, but this in and of itself, yet again, does not kind of make an argument against the objectivity of an ultimate standard. Even today,
Well,
ethicists or philosophers would agree that, well, let's say, in normal circumstances, it is a bad thing to shoot down a passenger airplane. But in an extraordinary circumstance like 9/11, it becomes a real moral option to shoot down a passenger airplane because you have a specific situation at a specific time. And yet, no one would say that, well, because in that situation, you actually are supposed to shoot down that airplane because it's the best moral option, or at least the lesser of two or three or four evils. No one would say that, well, that's why no values are up for grabs and subjective. It's extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measurements.
Well, so going back to how the Bible lays out that everybody's valuable, I really have to disagree with that because, I mean, all throughout the Bible, you have a clear distinction between men and women. Women are less valuable than men are. In Numbers, they don't even count women among their numbers. They only count the men. So, I mean, there's a clear distinction that there's a devaluation of women in the Old Testament, but also you have, Jesus that somewhat devalues women in preference of men. I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced in the New Testament. I agree that Jesus, he kind of corrects, I guess, a lot of things that are seen as bad, in the Old Testament, and kind of lightens up a little bit, I guess. But still, the fact remains is that at some point in time, God was mandating that women are worth less than men. It was okay to have slaves. But my entire point in bringing that distinction up is that I don't see any evidence or anything really to suggest that there is like an actual ultimate meaning to life or an ultimate way things are supposed to be. I don't really like, I know that you use the gravity as an example. That would be an example of something that physically exists, as a fictitious force. It physically exists. It has real effects on it. And just because we didn't know it doesn't mean that it didn't exist beforehand. I get that. But my point is that I don't see any evidence in reality that would lend credence to the idea that there is an ultimate meaning to life, or that there's a way that things are supposed to be. And even if there is a way that things are supposed to be, I don't think that we will ever know like whether or not we've actually attained that answer because of how we experience reality. So I think that it's a detriment of our human experience that we will never be able to know whether or not this ultimate way things are supposed to be is actually attained. I don't think that there's anybody out there that's setting the standard for how a society, a successful society can flourish. I think that there are certain things that end up working and that allow a society to flourish. But even now in various societies that do flourish, there are multiple different things that keep it from flourishing that we still have yet to learn. And there are some people that have, the opinion that, well, we need to change this, like universal health care here in America. There are people that disagree with the idea that healthcare should be universal. Everybody else has caught up with this idea, but there's still a holdout of people that think that it shouldn't be a universal thing. Like we shouldn't universally in America take care of people's health. And so I can see where you would think that there's like this ultimate way things are supposed to be. But I think that it's all wholly dependent on our own human experience, and we are the ones that dictate how we treat each other.
Yeah, but would you agree that most people, or that people in general, think that it's the most meaningful way to lead your life is to take care of others, not just to be like out for your self-interest, but to be caring and loving? Would you agree that this is how people in general perceive like life is supposed to be?
I wouldn't agree that that's how most people agree that life is supposed to be. I think that those particular attributes are held by a lot of people. I think that
Mm,
all those people probably have different ways in which to attain that, but there's inherently nothing wrong with somebody, living in a society, living, in adherence to all the rules that whatever society has established, and them being selfish about it and really just wanting to live for themselves, as long as as long as they're not hurting other people or hurting the society that they live in. There's nothing inherently wrong with being selfish,
mm,
as you live your life. Now, just because I have these different ideas about how to live my life,
mm.
as long as they stay within the confines of the society that we're in, there's inherently no difference between the two, like, I guess meanings that you give your life, or the values that each one of us holds. They're just different values. They're not, one's not better than the other, because we all exist within the confines of a shared, societal foundation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, but so you have like a minor difference there between. I guess the difference you put up is between a person who is like picking up from where I left things. A person who is actually caring and loving, and a person who is, well, not caring and loving, but more a selfish kind of guy, right? So as long as these people, are able to cooperate and not disrupt society too much, things are fine. Well, fair enough. But then again, what are you going to say to the person who is actually disrupting society? If given that the two, examples you gave, or I gave and you gave, a person who is loving and a person who is, well, a selfish guy, but still is fairly civilized and fairly respectable and whatnot. Given that there is nothing wrong with that, why should there be something wrong with someone who is, a really selfish guy and actually goes around robbing people, beating people up? Like, how are you going to justify making a judgment on that guy if, the first two guys are fine?
Well, I mean, like I said before, societies have rules in them. And if you have somebody that is existing outside of these societal rules, I mean, it's very easy to be like, "Hey, knock it off." Like, that's wrong. Like, because we have this agreed upon thing. I mean, what I was talking about before is two different sets of values existing within the same societal foundation. But
Yeah.
you're throwing in a person that is existing, that exists within the society, but does not adhere to that same societal
Yeah.
foundation, and
Yeah.
is causing a detriment to the society.
Yeah.
And so, since we have this societal foundation, this contract, if you will, that we've all agreed to live by, I mean, if you leave that society, then you're not causing any more trouble in that society. But with the way that human populations work, if you just go to another society, chances are you're still disrupting that society. So you're still violating the common values that we have agreed upon in that society. And so we would quarantine that person off, and in real terms, we put them in jail. They
Yeah.
they serve time. They do whatever they need to do in order to make amends. And if they can be reformed and worked back into the society where they live within the societal rules that we've all agreed upon, then there's nothing wrong. But we still have this consensus that we've agreed upon as far as the society goes. But I mean, that's
Yep.
what makes a society flourish, is a consensus among the individuals within a society. And because we have this consensus and we all agree to work together to the end goal of
Yeah.
surviving and flourishing as a society,
Mm.
then that's how the society survives. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of our individual values, this society still flourishes because we've all agreed upon
Yeah.
these fundamental sets of values.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I guess the difference. I mean, the difference between our views is this. I mean, for you, or I mean, let me know if I put words in your mouth. But for you, the consensus within a society to say that, well, meaning, the meaning of life is to flourish together as society. That, according to you, is subjective. Subjectively derived from a bunch of people who happen to agree. It does not correspond, again, to use that word, it does not correspond to how the universe is supposed to be or how things are supposed to be, right? It's just like people with their subjective opinion happening to agree on this set of values. And but again, since the universe doesn't dictate or has only an absolute way things are, but does not have an absolute way things are supposed to be, it's just, let's say, it's a lucky coincidence that, or it's a good thing that a society agrees to these values. However, here's what I believe is that there is an ultimate way, that there's ultimate meaning to the universe. And again, it is about, people loving each other and flourishing together. And so when a society does that, works towards that goal, they're actually, again, what I would call in tune with the meaning of the universe, with the meaning given to the universe. And again, so then I think the problem becomes that when you have a society, and I mean, there are enough examples even in these days, when a society does not agree, or when, the large majority of a society does not agree to what is happening, within its confines, but you have the powerful dictating the terms, forcing their agreement amongst themselves on everyone else, you are left with no other option than saying, well, these people, their subjective opinion happen to, it carries the day, but it's just, we don't like it. Our subjective standpoint says, well, we don't like it. But since the universe has no way it is supposed to be, they just, they're the lucky ones. Again, they can go off and do whatever. And we're left behind. And so that's, asking about, and I feel that the reality is, and, I mean, here in Lebanon, where I'm based, is, this is a reality, and people cry out and say, well, this is wrong. People, robbing their own society, that's wrong. The way people react is not, well, we don't like it. And, that subjective agreement among people is, well, again, they happen to be stronger, and our subjective agreement is, well, we are the losers. That's not the reaction that people have. People normally have the reaction, well, that's not supposed to be. It's, well, that's just wrong. And so that, when you're asking about evidence for an ultimate meaning, I do think that's actually evidence is, well, in like our instinct or our reaction, again, our experience of reality is not that when we see, again, subjective opinions being forged into an agreement that just robs everyone of their freedom, then we say, well, lucky them. Again, I have no way to judge that objectively, but we say, well, no, that's actually wrong. That's not the way things are meant to be. And that's what I'm saying is that, that instinct or that outcry is only explicable against the background of there being an ultimate goal to the universe or to human existence.
I'm still failing to see how that's how things are supposed to be.
Yeah. Like, again, I don't know for, like, I have no certainty, but again, I take into account, well, the way we experience reality. And I'm simply saying that the reaction that people have in the face of injustice is explicable against, which is, again, people usually say, well, this is wrong. They don't say, I don't like it. They say it's wrong. And that's explicable, consistently explicable only against the background of there actually being an ultimate meaning to human existence. It's not explicable against there not being an ultimate way things are supposed to be, because then, again, all you're left with is these people doing their thing, those people doing their thing, and that's it.
Well, let me ask you this. I don't know how it is as far as the COVID-19 pandemic in Lebanon, but here in America, there's a very big divide on whether or not we should wear masks. And it's seen as an injustice to make people wear masks. And with you talking about how people react to injustices, how is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be that people are made to wear masks, or is it supposed to be that people shouldn't wear masks?
Well, uh, I think yeah, I don't know. Like I have no idea. I'm not an expert on masks and infection and stuff. But I guess even that example, it points to people valuing, or like people believing that uh, safety is a real is a real thing, is a real deal, and also freedom of choice is a real thing. So we hold these values to be somehow, well, that's the way, you know it's kind of woven into the fabric of the universe, I would say. And again, people disagree. Some people say, well, this value is more important than that one. But that only even that, like, moral dilemmas only makes sense if you hold the conflicting values to be real. If there is, if safety and freedom weren't important, well, then who would care? It just doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
but who makes it important? Like, does God make it important, or do we make it important?
Well, I mean, what I believe that, so that God again gives every person like value and dignity, and that's where you start off with. That's why I can consistently or yeah, I can consistently say, well, if you violate human dignity, you're actually doing something wrong. You're not just doing something that I don't like, but it's actually wrong. Now, again, I that just to say that again, that doesn't prove that God exists. It doesn't prove that human dignity is a real deal, but it does mean that our reaction in the face of injustice, or in the face of, again, violation of what is meaningful, they are explicable, better explicable, against the notion that there is an objective or ultimate way things are supposed to be, and they're not that well explicable against the background that there is no measuring stick against which we can, evaluate things.
Well, but I guess with that, I still keep coming back to what evidence is there that there needs to be an ultimate measuring stick in the first place. I guess for me at least, I haven't really heard anything that solidifies the idea of an ultimate or absolute meaning to the universe, or absolute how things are supposed to be. I don't think that exists, but more importantly, I don't see the evidence that it does exist. Going back to your Newton example, there were clear pieces of evidence that gravity or some kind of force existed that kept things falling down. It just took one person to ask the question and then to explore the answer, right? I feel like if we were to explore this answer at this point, we wouldn't have anything in reality that would suggest that this absolute answer, to meaning in the universe, even needs to be there.
Yeah, I mean, my question would be, I mean, what kind of evidence would you expect, or what kind of evidence would satisfy you? Because by definition, like, scientific evidence coming from the physical world is ruled out, because we're not talking about the state of affairs that concerns, the physical reality, but we're talking about a non-physical issue here, which is about, again, meaning, value, and what is supposed to be. So my question would be, what would you expect to be, satisfying evidence that would tell you, well, John, there is actually an ultimate way things are supposed to be? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, yeah. So I mean, if there was, then like any particular claim to this ultimate meaning, I would think have to remain consistent throughout time. Like, for instance, we're using Christianity, one religion among many. I would think that God's morality, or his ultimate meaning to life, or how things are supposed to be, I wouldn't think that would change
Mm,
depending on the group of people that are interpreting his word, and
mm,
and the time and place that you're in. Because even now, you have several different groups of Christians that all have different ideas about how
Yeah.
God thinks this world is supposed
Yeah.
to be and operate.
Yeah.
And so I would think that if that ultimate answer does exist and that it has been revealed to somebody, then it would remain consistent. Like our understanding of it would remain consistent across different time periods and across different cultures.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of an absolute meaning is that it does not change. It's immutable.
Yeah, but that is not to say that people can still misinterpret that ultimate meaning, right? Just in the same way as gravity never, the law of gravity never changed. Apples fall from trees always according to the law of gravity. That was true 10,000 years ago. I don't know if apple trees already existed back then or whatever. It was true 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. It's true today. People just simply didn't understand it throughout time. So again, I guess that's the issue I brought up before. It's even if God communicates what meaning is, that does not, and given that people misinterpret that, and you're right, Christians disagree about this and that, but this in and of itself is not yet an argument against there being a real way things are supposed to be.
I guess I'm really confused by this because I really don't think how you can misinterpret like Numbers 31:17-18, where God has commanded the Israelites to kill all of the men and small boy children and everybody in the town except for all of the women and virgin girls. Them you can take for yourself, as sexual slaves. I don't understand God. I don't understand misinterpreting God's position on slavery and the taking of sexual slaves. I don't understand how you can misinterpret that blatant command from God and then later on claim, oh, well, we just misinterpreted him saying to take all these people by force and kill all of their loved ones. We misinterpreted that. I guess I don't understand how that can be misinterpreted.
Okay, fair enough. But could it be that, again, we're talking about an extraordinary situation, which makes extraordinary measurements required? Again, and which then again, as I said before, as ethicists even today would agree that there's no, this in and of itself does not mean that meaning or objective values are up for grabs. I understand your point that, well, this seems to be crystal clear that God, in violation of what he tells us in Genesis, well, that every human being is made in the image of God, then goes on to say, well, okay, these people are supposed to be killed. I understand your point as well. This is so crystal clear. There is no room for misinterpretation. But could you imagine that there is room to say that, well, this is an extraordinary situation?
And I guess I don't understand how an extraordinary situation allows the taking of sexual slaves at any point in history. I mean, this isn't exactly like the shooting down a plane because it's about to run into a building kind of scenario. I mean, literally both groups of people were just minding their own business until God said, "Hey, go and destroy these people, but take the women as slaves." So, I mean, I guess I don't understand the point of the extraordinary situation. I don't know what extraordinary situation would ever warrant violently destroying an entire group of people and taking the virgin women as slaves. I guess at least in my subjective idea of morality and everything, I really cannot come up with any kind of situation that would make that a good or okay thing to do.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'd be more than happy to discuss Old Testament stipulations and laws.
So I'm so sorry I keep harping on the Old Testament
No,
stuff,
that's
but
okay.
my entire point in it is because we
Yeah,
started off this particular line of thought with, what evidence would I expect? And,
yeah,
you came back with, well, maybe people were just misinterpreting what God meant or whatnot. I
yeah,
just see that's one instance, but I see a lot of different instances of someone's holy book, regardless of
mm,
religion, someone's holy book laying down how things are supposed to be. And then
mm,
over time, as society progresses forward, as our understanding of how we should treat each other to, flourish as a society, as
yeah,
that advances, religion advances right behind it and sort of catches up. So God's idea of how things are supposed to be changes with time, not because you've tacked on a new like testament or a new version or something like that,
mm,
but because the understanding of how we should treat each other changes, and that in turn changes how we understand how things are supposed to be from God's perspective. So I mean, I guess I'm not understanding how
okay,
misinterpretation really factors into changing what God means by some things.
okay, I see. So, I mean, what do you think? How did people 2000 years ago in the Roman Empire, like think about how people are supposed to be treated, or different, like women, slaves, men, and the different stratas of society? Like, do you have any knowledge about how people thought about these issues?
Well, I mean, not specifically in Roman society. I
Yeah,
know in the Jewish society, women were definitely not treated as equals to men. Their testimonies in court weren't exactly welcomed. It's not that they were untrusted, but just that pretty much it was seen as a custom for women not
yeah.
to give testimony in court. Uh, so I mean, I don't know about Roman society specifically, but there are various societies throughout history that have had very wildly different ideas about
Yeah.
what roles everybody should play.
Okay. Well, I'm saying that because, people like Aristotle, they took the shots. I mean, they defined for, again, Greco-Roman society about, what is true about different classes of people. And one of the things that Aristotle said is that a slave is just an animated tool, and a tool is like a slave. Another thing, Aristotle, when he died, well, he left 14 slaves on his estate. He also said, women are a different class of mankind, and basically for like a man, like his wife was just, a way to release his sexual desires, but there wasn't much more to that. Also, children were seen as well, they're somehow inferior to men, and man was the ultimate, pinnacle, seen as the ultimate pinnacle of society. And then into that come, the apostle Paul, who says, well, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither man nor woman, all are equal in Christ. And I'm saying that since you're saying that things change so much, what I found interesting is that you have, I'm just preparing another video for that. You have like people like Tom Holland, who is a secular historian. There are Jacques Derrida, from like an atheist philosopher, who say that, well, actually, the notion of universal rights and of equal dignity across mankind is an inherently Christian idea. It's an idea that started off with Jesus, or that kind of that comes from the Judeo-Christian heritage. And so what I find interesting is that you say, well, these values, they change, but um, and then religion catches up, whereas other people say, well, the idea that, well, there is a way things are supposed to be, and there is a way things are like people are supposed to be treated, and there is ultimate meaning to human existence. That is a Christian idea. And you yourself say, well, it is not, there is no ultimate way things are supposed to be. So you cannot, again, consistently argue that there is also a way things are supposed to be with regards to human relationships or how humans treat each other.
I mean, I really have to push back against the idea that Christianity came up with the equal value for everybody kind of thing.
So, so who came up with it?
Well,
I
I
mean,
mean, even
where do you get
so,
the idea from?
huh?
Like which, which system of thought gives you the idea that human life is equal in dignity and equal in value across, again, just across the board? Where do you get that
Well,
idea
I
from?
disagree that across the board people think that human life is equal. I mean, even with the founding of the United States, even though the document says that all men are created equal, they did not mean all men are created equal. They still owned slaves. They specifically did not write in the Bill of Rights or in the Constitution that slaves were equal to white people. So I mean, I really don't think that the whole idea that all humans are essentially valued equally until humanism, really came around. Which humanism probably does have a has a deeper background in history, but I would say that humanists are the ones that equally value human life. And it seems to me like just about every other religious idea or idea in the past has involved some kind of devaluation of human life, at least in some kind of respect. I would think that humanist ideology would assign equal value to all people.
Yeah, but where does the human, like, how does humanism or humanist philosophers, like, where do they ground or how do they argue for that? How do you, as a secular humanist, let's say, like, how do you consistently explain that all humans are equally valuable, other than it just being a claim hanging there in thin air?
Well, I mean, I haven't researched like the philosophies of humanism, but I mean, I would think that there's the determination that all human lives are of equal value. As a general idea, sans the very specific, instances where you could gauge whether or not this life is more valuable than that life. I feel like I feel like it's just sort of like one of those fundamental axioms. Like, my life is no more valuable than my wife's life, and
Yeah,
she has just as much value as I do.
yeah,
Like, I feel like this is a fundamental thing that humanists just agree upon
yeah.
as part of as part of the humanist worldview.
Okay, you used an interesting term, fundamental axiom. Like, how do you, so if you believe that this is a fundamental axiom, that all human life is equally valuable, like, what do you take to be evidence for that?
Mm, I
Since, again,
mean,
we're talking about a non-physical thing here, again, all human life is equal, and you describe it as a fundamental axiom. Like, where do you, again, how do you back that up? Because before you said, well, I would need evidence that there is an ultimate way things are supposed to be.
mhm.
And now you're saying, well, human life is equally valuable and it's a fundamental thing about reality or a fundamental axiom. But so where do you get that from?
Well, I
Other
mean,
than
the huh?
objective agreement between people.
Well, I mean, but by me saying that it's a fundamental axiom, it's a fundamental presumption on the humanist, belief, I guess, or the humanist worldview, is that
Okay.
everybody is inherently equal. I guess I can't really think of any kind of good argument that would suggests that human lives are not equal to one another, or the value of a human's life is different from the value of another human's life. Like I said, I think that there are certain situations where you could really have a conversation over what's more valuable. Like there's the whole dilemma of, there's a train and it's approaching a switch, and you can flip the switch and kill one person, or flip the switch and kill five. And it's like, which one do you do? It's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I agree. They're all valuable. They all hold the same value, but it's like, which switch do you flip? And then you can add things onto it that seem to increase the value of one particular person. Like, let's say one of the person in the group of five people is the president of the United States. To me, for my current president, I'm not sure that would really matter to me. But if it really mattered to you, you might choose to not kill him because of different contextual things. But at the very fundamental level, I feel like all humans are just as valuable as the next human, and that this is just one of those fundamental presumptions of a humanist worldview that is there because we presume it to be true.
Yeah, so it's a presumption presumption by definition. So it's not kind of based on evidence, right?
Well, I mean, I guess really the only evidence is that, I mean, I can't think right off the top of my head what evidence would seem to indicate that all human life is valuable, other than that is the subjective opinion that is encapsulated with humanism. I'm not trying to say that this is some kind of ultimate meaning or ultimate, or absolute, axiom or fundamental way that the universe is. I still hold to the idea that it's very subjective, and that humanism is a subjective worldview. And part of that subjective worldview of humanism is the presumption that all humans are equal, or equally valued. And so, I mean, I don't think that it needs to have evidence if that's the presumption that we're making. But I also don't see any evidence against that particular axiom. I mean, can you provide any kind of evidence? Can you think? Which I don't expect you to have any kind of evidence. I'm just saying, like, in general, what kind of evidence or what kind of argument would point to not all humans having equal value as a fundamental starting place?
Yep, very good question. I'll get right to it. Oh. Now my my electricity went off. I'm still connected, right?
Yeah, you're still connected. Yeah. So I know you said that might happen. We're coming up on an hour and a half, so I know if you've got if you need to go soon, I don't want to keep you for too much longer.
No, it's good. Well, let me just say two things. I hope the electricity comes back soon. So, first of all, what I find interesting is that you're happy to go with the presumption that you're happy to take the presumption that human life is equal, even though, again, you say, well, again, it's just presumption I take, even though there's necessarily no evidence for it. But then you wouldn't go with the presumption that there is ultimate meaning to the universe. And these things, I think they're actually interlinked, again, meaning, as I said, like the meaning to the universe is for people to love God, love each other as they love themselves, which comes very close to you saying, well, all human life is equally valuable and should be equally treated, or treated equally fairly. So I never said that this, like, I can, prove the meaning I propose or I presume, but you're not happy to take it, but you're happy to take, well, I presume that human life is equally valuable. And I can, to go right to your question, I think, there's very good reasons to actually not think that human life is equally valuable unless you have, again, some firm grounding, like the notion that God endows people with equal value. So one of the things is, well, people are unequally productive in society. There are people with very high intellect who are able to contribute far more to the flourishing of society than others. Take people with mental disabilities. They're not as useful, so to speak, or not as productive in society. And so there is good reason, unless you have something that again gives everyone value, regardless of their background, regardless of their intellect, regardless of their productivity. There is good reason to think that we're actually not equal in value, because we are not able to again be equally productive. So, and that because we're different in language, we're different again in IQ, we're different in productivity, we're different in how we care for one another, different in how we care for the environment and whatnot. And so there would be all sorts of reasons to actually think that people are not equal, because again we simply are not from the outset. And so
Well, see,
that's why I'm asking it, like, how do you argue for the fundamental equality of all human life, given that we're so different? How do you make
well,
that
I mean,
presumption?
like I said before, um, I don't think that those are good like distinctions as far as like value. The value that we place on other people and other things are very much subjective to our particular worldview. So in my humanist worldview, I subjectively place equal value on people. I don't think that like the intellectually disabled are of less value to society. I don't think that if people commit a crime, they are of less value than other people. This is still all very subjective. Like you might say those. I'm not saying that you are saying those things,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you are.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Just making sure. So I'm saying that all of these are very subjective. Um, so I subjectively believe that all human life is valuable. Somebody else may not see it that way, and it's just as subjective. But that doesn't mean that like my way is better than the other person's way. I mean, this is just something that I believe to be true, right? And it's not that I have like physical or empirical evidence that all human life is equal. This is a subjective valuation that I have made part of my customized or specialized worldview with how I decide to live out my life and interact with the society around me. So, with it being subjective, that means that other people could not see it that way, and that's just that's a perfectly valid way to see things. But I don't think that they need empirical evidence in order to have that valuation of people. Just like I don't think I need empirical evidence to support the valuation of these other people. But what, as far as like ultimate or absolute meaning in the universe, in order for me to be convinced that that does exist, I would need to see some kind of empirical evidence that that thing exists. And if there are religions out there that claim to have it, or somebody has an idea of what that is, if that doesn't remain consistent throughout time and throughout wherever it is on the earth or in the universe, I would think that is definitely not the absolute meaning. So until you can provide evidence that this absolute meaning exists in some fashion, which I don't know exactly how that would look, but if it does exist there, it should become apparent, I guess, at some time. But I think that due to our own human experience and how we perceive the world, I really don't think that we'll ever be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it does exist.
Yeah, but so when you're again, I hope we're not confusing the terms subjective and objective here. Let me just ask back in order for me to make sure I understand you correctly. You're basically saying you believe that all human life is equal, right?
Yes.
But do you hold this to be like, so that's obviously something you hold to be true. You as John, your opinion is that it is true, or like, let me put it this way. You as John believe it's objectively true that all human life is equal. Is that right? Or no?
I would not say like I can be objective about it, but I would not say that I think that it's objectively true. I think that based on my own subjective opinion about it, that it's true, but I would not say that it is objectively or absolutely true. I don't adhere to the
Yeah.
whole absolute kind of
Yeah.
mentality.
Sure, but I mean, we're all, we all hold what we believe to be true until we're proven wrong. But listen, you believe that the law of gravity applies again to apples falling from trees. I mean, you subject as a subject, as a person with subjective opinions, you do hold that to be objectively true, or you would also say, well, that's just, that.
Well, like I said, I can be objective about it. Like, for instance, me being objective about it would be me saying that somebody that has committed a crime has the
Yeah.
exact same inherent value as somebody that doesn't commit a crime. That would be me being objective about it, but that does not mean that they absolutely have the same value. Because I outside of our own experience, I mean, I don't think that anything inherently has value. We place value on things, and so the thing that I place, like when I look at these two different people, they have the same value to me, and
Okay.
it's going to be different for somebody else, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But we as a human species place value on things. Any organism that has a sufficiently enough complex nervous system are going to place value on different things. Like dogs, they place value on different things.
Okay.
Other sentient, semi-sentient creatures out there place different values on things. And
So, okay. I think I understand you better now. So you're basically saying, person, Jack, John, and Jill, they don't actually have, when you're saying human beings are equal in value, you're basically saying, well, since you said there is nothing or nothing in the universe has value, it's just you kind of subjectively projecting value on these people. Is this what you're saying?
well, yeah, but as humans, we all do that.
Yeah,
We
but
have a subjective valuation of other people.
so would you say that if you have a chair, a table, and a person in front of you, all are equally, to the universe, so to speak, they're equally valueless, but you as John just project value to these things?
Well, I mean, as in reference to the universe, yeah, I would say that there is no inherent value in any of those
Okay.
things to the
Yeah.
universe. But me, I create value for those things.
Okay. So again, so that means it's a complete subjective judgment you're making. There is nothing ultimately valuable about either the chair, the table, or the person. You just project that into those things.
Well, yeah, because the universe doesn't care about anything that is contained within it, because the universe doesn't have, like, the universe isn't conscious. It doesn't have a mind.
Yeah.
As far as we can tell, it doesn't have a mind.
Yeah.
So there's no way that the universe can place value on those objects,
Yeah.
or there's no way those objects can have
Yeah.
value.
Yeah. So yeah, it just reminds me again of what I think I started off with. It's just the bare, there's the bare valueless facts of existence, as I think again it was Sartre who said that, and then basically people with their subjective viewpoints giving value to what is basically or valueless. Would this describe the view you hold?
Um, can you say that again?
So would you
Sorry.
basically say that ultimately, and I really mean the word ultimately here as ultimately everything is meaningless and valueless, but you as John just project meaning into everything?
Well, I mean, I would say that I create like my own meaning in my own perspective. I create meaning. I think that the universe is meaningless, meaning that there's no ultimate end goal for the universe other than just to exist. And
Hmm.
I think that things contained within the universe just exist.
Yeah.
But it takes a mind in order to place value on those things.
Yeah.
So, because the universe doesn't have a mind, it therefore cannot inherently place value on things.
Okay. And so when basically, so if you, again, if a person who is, again, tell me if I'm putting words into your mouth here, but if a person which is, again, basically or ultimately valueless is being killed, what happens is that you, again, well, the thing that you gave value to, subjectively speaking, is, is gone now. And that is kind of a shame, or you don't like it, but it doesn't it doesn't violate how things are supposed to be. That person is just gone, like the chair could be gone if I throw it into the fire. There's, again, because all are equally valueless, it ultimately doesn't matter.
What specifically doesn't matter? Doesn't ultimately
it, it,
matter?
it doesn't matter, again, if it doesn't matter if you have a chair and a person who are both valueless. If they're gone, well, there's no, all it does, it bothers you, but it does not do, again, it doesn't
Okay.
fall short of how things are supposed to be, because there is no
So,
value to them.
okay. So I feel like what we're doing now is we're kind of mixing up our reference points.
Yeah.
When we're talking about valuelessness and meaninglessness, we're talking in reference to the universe or reality on the whole. And I would agree, reality does not care whether or not a chair is destroyed or a human life is destroyed.
Yeah.
But in the reference point of me, myself, or any other person, since we place value on things, those would not be valueless things. I value the human life over the chair. It would matter to me because in the reference point of me or any other human, those things have value. The only reference point that doesn't provide any kind of value is the universe on the whole, or the fabric of reality. That does not care whether or not it blows up a planet or a star, or
Yeah.
if it kills a child 6 months after it's born.
Yeah.
The universe really doesn't care about the things that are
Yeah.
contained within it.
Yeah. But then when you say that those things have value, that is just in your mind, because, as you
Right?
said, it's the mind that gives the value. So it's it's again, that I guess that's what I was getting at, is those things, they don't have value. The value you give them is something that happens in your mind. It is not, again, objective. It does not correspond to how these things actually are. You're basically
I
saying
mean, I mean,
this person in front of you is valueless. The
no,
universe
no, no,
is
no.
meaningless
That's
and
exactly. I'm saying exactly the opposite. I'm saying that the person in front of me has value because they're of value to me.
yeah, but who are you to but then that is exactly that's the exact definition of what it means to be, for something to be subjective. It's the value of that person is entirely in your head. It is not attached
Okay,
to the object, to the person itself.
so hold on. Okay, let me ask you this: if
Yeah.
if if we have inherent value to us, like,
Yeah.
because I get that you're having a tough time understanding my distinction, but let's go with your distinction. Everything has inherent value to it. Um, you know, why then does God command the killing, or why then do like bad things just seem to happen? Like, why did the what was it, the Newtown shooting of that elementary school? If everything has an inherent value to it, and it's absolutely valuable, why did that happen? Like, it seems to me like if the universe inherently gives things value in it, like human lives, then it would seem like the universe would treat them as if they had value. And we do not empirically observe this. We don't observe the universe having any kind of valuation of human life anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the universe, as you said, the universe is an unconscious thing. It cannot care in the first place. What I'm getting at is, again, if you're saying that everything is valueless, is and you say that, well, these things then have value. That person has value. The value is entire. It's just in your head. It cannot be. It's not, again, in the person. It's in your head. That's all you're left with, right?
Well, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I haven't really changed my answer on it.
Yeah.
That it's subjective, and everybody else can have a subjective view of the valuation of another person.
Yeah. So that again, but that means when the person is
Why?
gone, yeah.
Well, why does a person have to have absolute value?
I'm not saying a person has to have absolute value. I'm just saying I believe it makes, like, to believe that people have equal value, or that they actually have value other than just this value being subjective in our heads, I believe makes most sense to explain how we actually experience things. Because with your framework, I would have to tell you then when a loved one dies, it's, there you've just you've lost something that is, again, there is nothing of value gone. The only thing that happened is that the value that you attach to that thing out there is now, you don't have that thing anymore. But the thing itself that was gone was not valuable. It just was just a bare
But it
thing.
was valuable to me.
Yeah, sure, it was valuable to you, but that's it. It's like saying, I think this comes pretty close to saying, if you're saying that the value of a person is entirely in your mind, again, that means by definition that it's not out there, like, again, the thing itself is not objectively valuable. It's when you have a hallucination. Hallucinations are by definition subjective experiences. They don't correspond to how outer reality is. You hallucinate, I don't know, flying, oranges or
Tyrannosaurus
carrots
rexes.
or whatever. It just doesn't matter. These things, they are not out there. That's by definition what a hallucination is about. And so in the same way, if you're saying, well, a person is not valuable other than that value just being in my mind, that, again, that just means, well, there's nothing real about, again, that this
So
person is just
so
like a
so
rock. It's just
would
a
it
rock.
would it be accurate to say that you think people only have value if they absolutely have value?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You know,
Well, I mean, I guess I guess I just don't see there being like I don't see there being any value placed on anything if no mind exists with which to place value on it. Like, so let's remove humans from the picture. Let's go back to the island in the middle of the ocean. Um, you have a hurricane that's about to wipe that island off of the map. What you
yeah,
have on the island is a tree, let's say a chair, and a bunny rabbit.
yeah.
In reference to the universe on the whole, which one of those things has the most value?
The chair, the palm tree, or the rabbit.
Yeah.
Well, well, again, if the universe is all you are left with, they're equally valueless. It's just that there's nothing.
I'm talking about on your particular worldview that
Mm,
value is inherently infused into
yeah,
objects into the universe.
mm.
Of those things, which is the most which one is the most valued?
Well, I mean, I would go for the bunny as a as the thing with most you know
Okay,
uh, sense of
so
capacity for consciousness.
so if that has the most value on that island,
Yeah.
why then does the universe treat it as if it has no value?
Well, if you're asking me about my worldview, is again, I think the universe. I don't think you can talk about the universe treating anything. The universe is unconscious, so it just again, if the universe is what you're left with, things just happen.
Then
There's
how does
no.
the universe infuse value into objects?
Well, here's the thing. As you said, I completely agree with you. Unless you have a mind, nothing can give value, and so I guess that's where the notion of God comes in exactly. If you have a mind outside of the universe, the divine mind, which is a way kind of Christians talk about God, well, then you have a source from which value can be infused into the universe. And that's exactly
Okay,
what I'm talking about with human beings. It's the universe cannot possibly give value to human beings. As you say, human beings are just to the universe, they're valueless because the universe cannot give them value. But if,
okay,
if you have if you have a mind, a non-human mind outside the universe, well, then you have a source from which value can come from.
okay. Going back to my example of
Sure.
the tree, the chair, the bunny.
Yeah.
If God is the mind that inherently infuses value into objects, why doesn't God treat those objects as if they have value?
You mean why does he let a storm wipe over the island?
Well, I mean, why? Yeah, why is there a hurricane in the first place to wipe that out? Which could be extrapolated into why does God allow hurricanes now?
Yeah.
But I mean, it just seems to me like as far as the human experience goes, valuing something, with the train and the people strapped to the train tracks example,
Yeah.
you're compelled to make a decision, and
Yeah.
it's a difficult decision to make, but you're compelled to make a decision because you value something. If somebody's about to shoot your loved one, you want to try to do something to protect that person because you value them in your life. So if those are the ways that we express this, the value that somebody holds for us, why doesn't God also express that value? Why does he treat everything as if it is valueless? Because he doesn't seem to do anything in order to prevent harmful things from happening to people.
So are you basically saying why do evil things happen given that God thinks that, or
Well,
yeah,
no,
that human beings are valuable?
well, not why do evil things happen necessarily, but why. I'm asking why, if God infuses value into us, why
Yeah.
does God treat us as though we are not valuable?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Again, it's the question of, well, on the bigger picture, on evil, bad, or suffering. But note from the beginning that where we're at is you already have to take God into the equation of what we're talking about. Is what we said before is that the universe cannot possibly give value. And I said, and that's what you said, and I agree with that. And I basically said, well, if you have again a mind outside the universe, this mind can infuse human life, particularly with value. And then you go back, like you get back to me saying, well, why does God seem to do things or run things the way they are, which means that things of value to him get again wiped off the face of the earth. I'm simply saying at this stage is, it's a great question. It's a very big question, but this question in and of itself has to expect an answer that has God as part of it, you know? Because
Right.
if you affirm that people are of objective, or that there is objective value out there, or that human life is objectively valuable, uh, then again, when you bring up the question of, well, why do evil things happen, or these things happen, you cannot give an answer without God in the picture, because if you take God out of the picture, you take value out of the picture. That is objective value. You know what I mean?
Well, it kind of seems like whether or not God's in the picture, value is not in the picture either. It seems to me like God treats everything as if it were valueless, regardless of whether or not He infuses things with value.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But then if you take God out of the picture, you cannot even talk about value in the first place, other
Well, I
than
mean,
that
yeah, you
value
can.
existing in your mind.
Well, I mean, you can talk about value. You can't talk about absolute value because that doesn't exist, but you can definitely talk about value. And
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
that is
we treat,
objective value.
huh?
You talk about subjective value.
Well, yeah, but everything has subjective value to it. My point is that God treats us as though we are valueless,
Less.
because he doesn't prevent hurricanes from devastating portions of the United States.
Yeah.
He doesn't prevent this pandemic from taking, at least in the United States, over 138,000 lives. God doesn't
Mm.
prevent these things. If God infuses us with value, then he definitely treats us as if we do not hold whatever value he's given us.
Well, but so, okay, but how would you say that, okay, the bad stuff happening, like COVID-19 and all that stuff, like seems to indicate that God treats us as if we're valueless? Would you also be prepared to say that all the good stuff that is happening, like you having a happy marriage with your wife, or you know, enjoying going hiking with your son, or like having a good time with friends, or people actually, you know, advancing science, or people helping other people, would you be prepared to say that these good things indicate that God treats us as if we're valuable?
I don't see the value in focusing on that, because that's kind of assumed that good things are because of God in this particular worldview, right? In this particular worldview, it's assumed that the good things are because of God. What I'm talking about here is the contrast between the good things that happen and the bad things that happen. So to me, it just seems to reinforce the fact that God does not treat us as valuable things, because he not only allows the bad things to happen, but also because the good things seem to happen as well. I mean, you would think that if God had, had valued us at a certain value,
Hmm.
and he infused all of us with value, he would evenly treat us with value. So my problem is the distinction between the good things and the bad things that happen, and how that seems to indicate that there really is no value to things. Because like a good, like I guess I just don't understand why God would do something good for Mary here in the United States by helping her find her keys or giving her an A on a report card. But then over in another area of the world, a small child gets bone cancer and dies at like 6 months or 12 months old. Like, to me, it seems like God just treats us like we have no inherent value, regardless of whether or not he gives us inherent value.
Yeah. Well, you know, I would, you know, I think, you know, it is fair enough for you to say that, well, because bad things happen and good things happen, or because it seems, let's say, it seems to be arbitrary. Is this what you're saying? Again, a
Mhm.
person, you know, having a good time, and this child in Africa having a bad time and actually dying. There's some just seems to be arbitrariness. Is this what you're saying? And this in itself, I think so. What I'm saying is, it's fair enough to say that, well, this makes it hard for me to believe that a God exists who infuses human life with value. But what I think is inconsistent is to say that there are bad things which happen, and, well, you know, they seem to indicate that God doesn't treat us as if we're valuable, but then to not, acknowledge that there is good things happening, and that they would in turn indicate that God does treat us or see us as if we're valuable. If you take the full thing, the arbitrariness of good and bad, as evidence against God, or as an argument, well, it seems God, if he exists, doesn't care. Fair enough, but I don't think it's consistent to say, well, there is bad stuff. God, if he exists, doesn't care. But then say, well, the good stuff has just to be taken for granted. Because if God is in the picture, then he's in the picture both for the good and the bad.
So God is responsible for the bad?
No, that's
That
not what I'm
happens?
saying. I'm
Okay,
working
sorry.
with the argument that I'm simply trying to point out that I believe you're inconsistent in saying, well, let's assume there is a God, because kind of you're engaging what I've been saying. Well, there is value because God has given us value, and then you said, well, it doesn't seem like God thinks we're valuable because there is bad stuff happening. And so, fair enough. But to which I responded, well, how do you evaluate the good stuff that is happening with God in the picture? And you seem to be saying, well, God has no bearing on that, but I happily focus on the bad stuff.
No, I'm not saying that we focus on the bad stuff. In fact, what I said was that the assumption in the worldview is that God is responsible for the good things. And the only issue that I had was the discrepancy between God causing the good things to happen, but God seemingly also causing the bad things to happen, which seems to indicate to me that if God placed value on us or infused us with value, then it would seem like he would treat us as such. But I don't see that empirically with the way that good things happen and the way that bad things happen. I feel like they happen indiscriminately, I guess.
Yep, fair enough. I mean, I don't know how. I would be happy to talk about this again. I think it takes us just on a tangent of, well, again, why does good and bad stuff happen?
Yeah.
And but again, I would even say, well, if you claim these things to be objectively good and objectively bad, then you would have to work with God in the picture. Because again,
I mean, to be fair, I don't claim that they are objectively good or bad. Yeah. I think you could be objective in your evaluation of them, but I don't think that they are by themselves objective, like good or bad things. Those are good, bad, right, wrong. Those are all subjective words. But yeah, we are right at 2 hours now. So I do have a couple of super chats, which if anybody has any questions, super chats will get preference. And I'll try to answer some other questions if I can. But if you really want your question answered, you'll have to do a super chat. We do have a few to go over. First, I want to say welcome to Dan Zeke to the Mafia, to the Skeptic Mafia, becoming a mafioso. Thank you so much for that, Dan. And then we've got Nathan Jasper, who at the very beginning asked, meaning doesn't exist outside of a mind, so asking if reality has a meaning is like asking if a rock is sad. Do you have any input on that, Lucas?
So again, if asking if reality has meaning is like asking if a rock is sad?
Right.
Yeah, well, again, I guess the person who asked is probably, I think, resonates or echoes what you said. If there is no meaning to the universe because there is no mind which can infuse the universe with meaning. Again, the only meaning you get is in your mind. It's subjective. It's not actually woven into the objective fabric of reality. Again, to which I respond, well, if you want to affirm objective meaning to human life particularly, but to anything else, you would have to work with a mind that is outside the universe, and that would be God.
Okay. Metalhead said that Zoroastrianism was humanism based. I don't know. I only know a little bit about Zoroastrianism. I know that it has a lot of connections with Christianity, though.
Yeah, well, I guess, the main problem with Zoroastrianism in terms of, using it as a basis for value or human value, is that Zoroastrianism from the start starts with kind of two deities. Zoroastrianism works a lot with the contrast between darkness and light, and good and bad. And so it's kind of, from the start you seem to have two opposing forces in conflict, and that I believe makes it very hard to to base to make the claim that, well, the good is what we should go for, or dignity is what we should go for. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Chrismer and Dave, he's part of the Skeptic Mafia. He asked, what would he say about the Epicurean point of view, where the meaning of life is to extract as much pleasure from life while causing the least amount of harm? So, what do you think about that?
Say again. The meaning of life is to what?
Well, the Epicurean point of view is that the meaning of life is to extract as much pleasure from life while causing the least amount of harm.
And what my opinion on that is?
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I have nothing against, pleasure or fun or joy or these kind of things. In fact, the Bible says, well, be joyful. And so there's not, and on my worldview, God created pleasant things for us to enjoy with pleasure. So I'm not against the concept of pleasure. So in this sense, I guess I could go with parts of that. I just don't think that pleasure should serve as the ultimate goal, or on Christian worldview, pleasure in and of itself does not function as the ultimate thing to go for. However, that's not to say that pleasure is just inherently bad,
Right. Well, in my opinion of it is that's a perfectly fine, that's a fine point of view, the Epicurean point of view. I don't think that it's any better or worse than any other one out there that exists within the same kind of confines. Dan Zeke, who had just become a member, says GE is a nihilist. I'm not a nihilist. I definitely place value on this life. I don't think that life is meaningless because I place value on it. So I definitely wouldn't consider it. I wouldn't consider myself a nihilist, which I've heard that maybe my understanding of nihilism is a little off center. So I'll have to educate myself on what nihilism is. But anyways, one last question, unless we get any last minute super chats. Critical Chris asks, since God is a subject, anything he values would simply conform to his mind, making it subjective. How are you not just using objective to mean God derived?
Yeah, good. I mean, very good question. I mean, did we actually define subjective and objective? I mean,
well, I know that I did, saying that you can be objective about something. I made the distinguishing thing between subjective, objective, and absolute. But I don't think that we ever established exactly what objective and subjective were.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the way I think I put it this way: it's objective is something that is independent of human opinion. Like, again, H2O kind of being the water molecules, whereas subjective is something that is inherently dependent of human opinion. Again, to say that carrots taste better than apples, well, it's objective thing. So I do think that if you say that by placing a divine mind, it's not the source that, or the things that come from this mind, be it meaning for the universe or for human life, or value placed on human life, is not subjective, because it's not, again, God is not a human person, and if he's the ground of all being, that means, well, that's, again, the ultimate / objective source of how things are supposed to be. So I guess I would not confuse, again, the divine mind with the human mind, as, again, everything that comes from a human mind, again, when it comes to preferences, these are subjective things. But yeah, that would not apply to the divine mind, because it's not a human entity.
Right. And then actually the last thing that we're going to go out on is Jucane, another one of my Skeptic Mafia members, had a really good question and this is just coming from your own personal point of view. Why does God allow evil, or why does God create evil? Like what is your explanation for evil in the world?
Well, like that question after 2 hours of live stream, again, it just opens a whole other. It opens this very big topic. Again, the only, to sketch out the response, I would say that if you talk about evil, and if you mean that evil is, again, it's actually in things. It's not just in your head. If you're saying that things are objectively evil, then you're basically assuming that there is objectively good. But when we talk about objective good and objective evil, again, we have to assume a source, a mind that transcends the universe and humanity, which infuses objective meaning into into the universe. So I would simply say that any answer to that question would have to work with God in the equation if you want to affirm that things are objectively evil. And if you're saying, well, things are subjectively evil, well, then the question dissolves, because then it's like saying, well, I don't like vanilla ice cream. It's just completely subjective. That's how I would respond.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know that we could go for another 2 hours on just this particular question as well. But we've been going for 2 hours already. We definitely need to go. I know that you need to go. You've got other things to do. I do want to say to everybody that's watching this, I really appreciate you guys joining in, leaving all of the great comments that I've been seeing you guys leave. And I hope that all of you have a really nice weekend. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. And I guess we'll see you guys on Monday. Deflate, do you want to tell people where they can find you at?
Well, did you put my link in the description of the video? Yeah, guys, I mean, I release one video every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Beirut time, which is 2 p.m. Central time. And check out the link. Please subscribe. And I hope we'll have another live stream possibly, John.
Oh yeah, awesome. Definitely. I found this conversation very intriguing to have. I got lost in the conversation. I didn't realize, exactly how long we were going. Even after realizing, oh, it's about an hour and a half, and then it's like I realized, oh crap, it's 2 hours. So
yeah, thanks a lot, John, for having me on. Really appreciate that.
Oh, awesome. No problem. Everybody, if you're interested in these types of conversations, questions, and everything like that, definitely go and check out Deflate's channel. I know that he's got a few more videos up other than the one that's linked in the description. So definitely go check that out and have good conversations over there with him. And I guess we'll see everybody later. Y'all, like I said, don't forget to stand up, use your voice, and have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.